They say you never truly know someone until money enters the equation. I learned that lesson at 63 years old, sitting in my home office with headphones on, listening to my only son plot to steal my life savings. The voice I'd heard say, "Mama," for the first time, the boy I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through chicken pox, was now calculating exactly how much he could drain from my accounts before I noticed. My name is Patricia Holloway, and this is the story of how I caught my son red-handed trying to rob me blind, and how I made sure he'd never do it to anyone else again. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your state or country in the comments. It helps me know I'm not alone in this, and that maybe my story can help someone else out there. This all started 18 months ago, though I didn't know it at the time. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, in the same colonial-style home my late husband Robert and I had bought 37 years earlier. Robert passed away 4 years ago after a battle with cancer, leaving me with a comfortable estate, insurance policies, investments, the house, and savings we'd carefully built over decades of hard work. Robert had been an architect, and I'd spent 29 years as a registered nurse before retiring. After Robert died, I managed everything myself. I wasn't some helpless widow who didn't understand finances. I balanced our checkbooks for nearly 40 years, made investment decisions alongside Robert, and knew exactly what every account was worth down to the penny. But my son, Michael, seemed determined to paint a different picture. Michael was 41, a financial planner living in Atlanta. He'd always been ambitious, maybe too ambitious. His practice was successful on the surface, nice office, expensive suits, luxury car, but I'd started noticing things. He'd asked to borrow money that was never repaid. He'd mentioned business opportunities that needed immediate capital. There was always something. About 8 months ago, during one of his visits to Charleston, Michael suggested he should take over managing my finances. "Mom, you shouldn't have to worry about all this stuff," he said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table with that concerned son expression I'd seen 1,000 times. "Let me handle it. It's literally what I do for a living. You can just relax and enjoy your retirement." I hesitated. Something felt off about the way he was pushing, but he was my son. And he was a professional. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let him take over some of the management. Not everything, I'm not foolish, but enough that he'd have access to several accounts and could make certain decisions on my behalf. That's when I signed the limited power of attorney documents he'd prepared. He explained each one, assured me they were standard, told me I could revoke them any time. I trusted him because he was my child, the boy I'd given life to and raised to be a good man. What I didn't know was that I'd just handed my son the keys to my financial destruction, and he was already planning how to use them. The first 3 months after Michael took over were uneventful. I'd receive statements in the mail and everything seemed normal. He'd call every week asking how I was doing, talking about his work, his clients, his life in Atlanta. We'd always been close, or so I thought. I was proud of him, proud that my son had built a successful career, proud that he wanted to help his aging mother. But then small things started happening that made my instincts prickle. In month 4, I noticed a withdrawal from my money market account that I didn't recognize. $25,000, coded as a portfolio rebalancing. When I called Michael about it, he had an immediate explanation. "Mom, I moved that into a higher yield investment vehicle. You'll see better returns. That's why you have me managing this stuff, so you don't have to worry about these details." I accepted that answer, but something nagged at me. A week later, I tried to log into my investment account online and discovered my password had been changed. When I called the company, they told me that my authorized representative, Michael, had requested the change for security purposes and that I'd need to contact him for the new credentials. That's when the knot in my stomach turned into genuine concern. I called a friend from my nursing days, Linda Chambers, who'd gone through something similar with her nephew. We met for coffee at our usual spot downtown, a little cafe on King Street where the servers knew our orders by heart. I explained what was happening, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound like a paranoid old woman. Linda didn't sugarcoat it. Patricia, you need to protect yourself. My nephew cleaned out $40,000 before I caught on. These people count on you being too embarrassed to suspect your own family, too trusting to verify what they're telling you. She gave me the name of her attorney, a woman named Sandra Reeves who specialized in elder financial abuse. I bristled at that term, elder abuse. I wasn't some confused senior citizen. I was sharp, capable, completely competent. But Linda grabbed my hand across the table and looked me straight in the eye. Your pride isn't worth your life savings, Patricia. Make the call. 2 days later, I sat in Sandra Reeves's office on Broad Street, a converted historic building with high ceilings and crown molding. Sandra was in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that had clearly seen every variation of family betrayal imaginable. I laid out everything for her. The power of attorney documents, the unexplained withdrawal, the changed passwords, my growing unease. She listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. Mrs. Holloway, what you're describing follows a very common pattern. The question is whether your son is simply being overly controlling or if something more serious is happening. I think we need to find out which one it is before we act. And I think we need to do it in a way that protects you legally if things are as bad as they might be. That's when she suggested something I never imagined I'd do. I want you to start recording your conversations with your son, Sandra said, leaning forward with her elbows on the desk. South Carolina is a one-party consent state, which means you can legally record any conversation you're part of without informing the other person. If Michael is doing something improper, he'll eventually tell you about it, and we'll have evidence. The word evidence hit me like ice water. Evidence against my own son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart, who'd called me from college every Sunday for 4 years. Now I was being advised to secretly record him like he was a criminal. But I thought about that $25,000. I thought about my changed passwords. I thought about Linda's nephew and the $40,000 he'd stolen. And I thought about how many times Michael had emphasized that I didn't need to worry about the details. How do I do this? I asked Sandra. She pulled out her phone and showed me an app, walking me through how to set it up, how to save the recordings to a secure cloud storage, how to document dates and times. Call him about your accounts, she instructed. Ask questions, express concerns, see how he responds. If he's being honest, you'll have nothing to worry about. If he's not, he'll likely reveal himself. I left her office feeling sick to my stomach, but determined. That evening, I downloaded the recording app and tested it several times to make sure I knew how it worked. Then I sat in my living room staring at my phone, working up the courage to call my son and lie to him about why I was calling, so I could catch him in his own lies. The first recorded conversation happened 3 days later. I called Michael on a Thursday evening, my hands shaking as I pressed the record button. "Hey, Mom, how are you doing?" His voice was warm, cheerful, the same voice that used to call me from the school nurse's office faking sick. "I'm fine, honey. Listen, I've been looking at my statements and I'm a little confused about some of the activity. Can you walk me through what's been happening with the investments?" There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. "Sure, Mom. What specifically are you concerned about?" "Well, there was that $25,000 transfer you mentioned, and I'm seeing some other movements I don't quite understand. Can you explain your strategy?" What followed was 15 minutes of financial jargon, reassurances, and explanations that sounded plausible but felt hollow. He told me about diversification, about tax advantages, about market timing. But he never gave me specific account numbers. He never offered to send me detailed statements. He kept everything vague. "Mom, you really don't need to stress about this stuff," he said finally. "That's why I'm handling it. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me take care of you now." There it was again, that phrase. Don't worry about it. The same thing abusers say to their victims. The same thing con artists say to their marks. I thanked him, told him I loved him, and ended the call. Then I sat there with my phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face, knowing that my son was lying to me but not yet knowing how deep the betrayal went. So, over the next 6 weeks, I made 7 more recorded calls to Michael. Each conversation revealed a little more, like pulling threads from a sweater until the whole thing starts to unravel. I asked about specific accounts. I mentioned I wanted to make a withdrawal for some home repairs. I expressed concern about not having access to my own financial information. Michael's responses grew more defensive, more controlling. He told me I was overthinking things. He suggested I might be getting confused in my old age. He even recommended I see a doctor about my memory, as if asking to see my own bank statements was a sign of cognitive decline. That comment, the one about my memory, made me angrier than anything else. This was gaslighting, plain and simple. He was trying to make me doubt my own competence, my own sanity, so I wouldn't question what he was doing. But I kept quiet. I played the part of the concerned but trusting mother, and I kept recording. Sandra and I met every 2 weeks to review what I'd captured. She'd listen to the recordings with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining an X-ray, pointing out the manipulation tactics, the evasive answers, the red flags. He's definitely hiding something, she said during our 4th meeting, but we don't have proof of theft yet. We have proof of control, proof of deception, but not proof of actual financial crimes. We need more. I was running out of patience. Every day that passed was another day Michael had access to my accounts, but Sandra was right. If we moved too soon, if we accused him without ironclad evidence, he could cover his tracks, destroy records, claim I was a confused elderly woman making false accusations. Then, in the 8th week of recording, everything changed. Michael came to Charleston for what he said was a check-in visit. He arrived on a Saturday morning in his BMW, wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying a leather portfolio. We had lunch at my house. I made his favorite, chicken and dumplings, and the whole time I had my phone in my cardigan pocket, recording app running. After lunch, he opened his portfolio and pulled out some papers. "Mom, I need you to sign these. They're just updates to the power of attorney, expanding it a bit so I can make some moves that will really benefit your portfolio." I looked at the documents. They weren't small updates. They gave him full control over every single asset I owned, including the house. They allowed him to make gifts on my behalf, change beneficiaries, and access safe deposit boxes. This wasn't portfolio management. This was a complete takeover. "Michael, this seems like a lot. Why do you need this much authority?" His jaw tightened. "Mom, I'm trying to help you. But if you don't trust me, maybe I should just step back and let you figure it all out yourself. Is that what you want?" It was a threat disguised as hurt feelings. Sign over everything or lose your son's help entirely. The manipulation was so naked, so obvious that I almost called him out right there. But I didn't. Instead, I told him I needed to think about it, that I wanted to read through everything carefully first. He didn't like that answer, but he couldn't push too hard without showing his hand. After Michael left that day, I immediately called Sandra. She told me not to sign anything and to bring the documents to her office first thing Monday morning. That weekend felt like the longest of my life. I barely slept, replaying every conversation with Michael, every warning sign I'd ignored, every time I'd chosen to believe him because he was my son. Monday morning, Sandra looked at the documents and her expression went dark. "Patricia, if you'd signed these, he would have had the legal right to liquidate everything you own. Your house, your investments, your savings, all of it. This is exactly what we were worried about." The next day, Sandra filed a request with the court for a full accounting of all my financial accounts. Michael, as my power of attorney, was legally required to provide complete records of every transaction he'd made on my behalf. It took 3 weeks for those records to arrive, and when they did, Sandra spread them across her conference table like evidence at a crime scene. That's when we saw it. Over the 6 months Michael had been managing my accounts, he transferred $187,000 to various accounts I didn't recognize. The transfers were labeled as investment purchases and portfolio adjustments, but Sandra's forensic accountant traced them to shell companies and accounts that Michael controlled. My son had stolen almost $200,000 from me. I sat in Sandra's conference room, staring at the paper trail of my own son's betrayal, and felt something inside me turn to steel. This wasn't just theft. This was premeditated, calculated, systematic robbery from his own mother. He'd looked me in the eye, told me he loved me, told me he was taking care of me while draining my life savings. But we still needed one more piece. We needed Michael to incriminate himself in his own words. Sandra suggested I call him one more time, confront him with specific transaction questions, and see how he responded. Be direct, she coached me. Reference specific transfers. Make him think you're getting wise to what he's doing. If he confesses, tries to justify it, or threatens you, that's what we need. That evening, I made the call. My hand was steady this time. I wasn't the confused, trusting mother anymore. I was a woman going to war. Michael, I need to talk to you about something serious. I've been looking at my account statements, really looking at them, and I see transfers I never authorized. Nearly $200,000 moved to accounts I don't recognize. I need you to explain this to me right now. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then he laughed, actually laughed. Mom, those are investment vehicles. I've told you this. You're getting yourself worked up over nothing. I want to see documentation, Michael. I want to see where that money went. His voice changed, became harder. You know what your problem is? You don't trust anyone. Dad handled everything and you just went along with it. Now you think you're some kind of financial expert? You don't know what you're looking at. So explain it to me, in detail, right now. No, Mom, I'm not going to keep justifying every decision I make on your behalf. You either trust me or you don't. I pushed harder. Michael, I'm not asking. I'm telling you, I want complete documentation of where my money went, or I'm revoking your power of attorney and reporting this to the authorities. That's when he made his fatal mistake. You're not going to do that, he said, and his voice was cold now, nothing like the son I'd raised. Because if you do, I'll make sure everyone knows you're mentally incompetent. I'll tell the family you've got dementia. I'll tell your friends you can't handle your own affairs. Who do you think they'll believe? A successful financial planner or a confused old woman making wild accusations? There it was. The threat. The admission that this was all about control and money. And it was all on tape. Before I could respond, he continued, his anger fully unleashed now. Do you have any idea how much I've had to deal with? How much money I owe? My practice is underwater, Mom. I've got creditors breathing down my neck. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars you don't even need. You live in one house. You drive one car. What are you saving it all for? You're going to die eventually anyway, and it'll all come to me. I'm just accelerating the timeline. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't even pretending anymore. He was justifying theft from his own mother because he saw my money as already his, as if I were already dead. So you did take it, I said quietly. He realized his mistake too late. That's not, Mom, you're twisting what I said. I made some strategic moves with your portfolio, that's all. Strategic moves, I repeated. Is that what you call stealing from your mother? I didn't steal anything. That money is being invested. You'll see returns. Jesus, I'm trying to help you and you're treating me like a criminal. Michael, I want you to return every penny you took right now or I'm going to the police. He exploded. You're not going anywhere. You don't have the spine for it. You'll forgive me because you always do, because I'm your son and you're too weak to actually do anything about it. The call ended with him hanging up on me. I sat there in my kitchen, the recording still running, capturing my ragged breathing and the sound of my heart breaking. I'd caught him, every word, every confession, every threat. The next morning, I met with Sandra and played her the recording. She listened without expression until the end, then sat back in her chair and nodded slowly. That's everything we need, she said. He confessed to the theft, threatened you with claims of incompetence, and showed clear intent to continue stealing. We can prosecute this criminally and civilly. The question is, are you ready to do that to your son? Enough! I looked at her, and I didn't hesitate. He's not my son anymore. My son would never do this. The man on that recording is a thief and a liar, and I want him to face consequences for what he's done. Sandra smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Then let's destroy him. If you've dealt with family betrayal like this and want to see how this ends, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Click that button now. Sandra moved with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a general. Within 48 hours, she'd filed a criminal complaint with the Charleston Police Department, a civil lawsuit for elder financial abuse, and a formal complaint with the South Carolina State Bar Association, since Michael's actions constituted professional misconduct as a licensed financial advisor. But before any of that became public, I did something that gave me more satisfaction than I'd expected. I sent Michael an email at 6:47 on a Thursday morning. The subject line read, "Effective immediately." The body of the email was brief. "Michael, your power of attorney over my accounts is hereby revoked effective immediately. I have documented evidence of your theft of $187,000 from my accounts over the past 6 months. I have recordings of our conversations, including your confession from our call on November 14th. I have filed criminal charges, a civil lawsuit, and a complaint with the State Bar Association. All evidence, including audio recordings, has been submitted to the appropriate authorities. You will be hearing from the police. Do not contact me. Do not come to my house. Any further communication should be directed through my attorney, Sandra Reeves, Patricia Holloway." I attached the complaint filings and a timestamp log of every recorded conversation. Then I copied Sandra, the police detective assigned to the case, and the State Bar Association investigator, and I hit send. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. He called 6 more times in the next hour. Then the text messages started, ranging from angry, "You'll regret this," to pleading, "Mom, please, we can work this out," to desperate, "I'll give it all back, just drop the charges." I blocked his number and forwarded every message to Sandra and the police. That afternoon, 2 detectives from the Charleston Police Department came to my house. Detective Marcus Green was in his 50s, a calm man with kind eyes who sat in my living room and listened to every recording I'd made. His partner, Detective Lisa Chen, took notes and asked clarifying questions. When the recordings finished, Detective Green looked at me with something like respect. "Mrs. Holloway, this is the most thoroughly documented case of financial elder abuse I've seen in my 23 years on the force. Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late, and they certainly don't gather evidence like this. Your son made detailed confessions on these recordings. This is going to be an open and shut case." And what happens now? I asked. "We'll issue a warrant for his arrest. Given that he's in Georgia, we'll coordinate with Atlanta PD. He'll be arrested, extradited back to South Carolina for arraignment. With this level of evidence, the district attorney will definitely prosecute. You're looking at felony charges, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, theft, possibly fraud. He's looking at serious prison time if convicted." The words prison time hung in the air. My son, in prison. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. But Detective Chen must have seen something in my face because she leaned forward. "Mrs. Holloway, I know this is your son, but what he did wasn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was calculated theft over many months. He threatened you. He tried to gaslight you. This is who he chose to be." Michael was arrested in Atlanta 6 days later. The mugshot appeared in the local news. My son, in handcuffs, being led into a police station. The headline read, "Financial advisor charged with stealing $187K from elderly mother." The call started immediately. Michael's ex-wife, whom he'd divorced 3 years earlier, called to tell me she wasn't surprised. He'd hidden assets during their divorce and left her with debt. Two of his former clients called my attorney after seeing the news, saying they'd had concerns about their accounts, but Michael had convinced them they were mistaken. The State Bar Association investigation uncovered 3 other complaints that had been filed but never fully pursued. My son hadn't just robbed me. I was apparently one victim in a pattern of financial deception. The preliminary hearing was held 3 weeks later in Charleston County Courthouse. I sat in the gallery with Sandra beside me, watching Michael sit at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. He'd hired an expensive attorney, some slick lawyer from Columbia who specialized in white-collar crime. Michael never looked at me, not once during the entire proceeding. The prosecution laid out the case, the power of attorney, the unauthorized transfers, the shell companies, the recordings. When they played the audio of Michael's confession and threats, I watched the judge's expression harden. She was a woman in her late 60s, probably close to my age, and I could see the moment she stopped seeing this as just another financial crime case and started seeing it as a son betraying his mother. Michael's attorney tried to argue that this was a misunderstanding, that his client had made poor judgment calls, but hadn't committed theft because he'd planned to return the money with investment returns. The judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Holloway," she said, looking directly at Michael, "you systematically stole money from your mother while in a position of trust. You threatened her when she discovered what you were doing. You attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent to cover your crimes. The evidence against you is overwhelming. I'm denying bail reduction. Trial is set for March 15th. Michael's attorney requested a meeting with the prosecution to discuss a plea deal. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, told Sandra they were open to negotiation, but wouldn't accept anything less than felony conviction with prison time, full restitution, and permanent revocation of his financial planning license. I thought I'd feel vindicated when Michael's world came crashing down. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my son. I'd raised him, loved him, sacrificed for him, and somewhere along the way, he'd become someone I didn't recognize. The civil lawsuit moved forward simultaneously. Sandra filed for full restitution of the stolen $187,000, plus legal fees, emotional distress damages, and punitive damages. Michael's assets were frozen pending the outcome of both cases. His practice collapsed. His clients fled. His professional reputation was destroyed. The life he'd built through charm and deception crumbled in a matter of weeks. All because he'd underestimated his mother and gotten too confident in his own lies. 2 weeks before the trial, Michael's attorney reached out to Sandra about a settlement. Michael wanted to plead guilty to avoid trial, return all the stolen money plus interest, and accept a lesser prison sentence in exchange for cooperation. Sandra looked at me across her desk. "It's your decision, Patricia. We can take this to trial and likely win everything, or we can accept the plea and guarantee restitution." I thought about it for 3 days. I thought about standing in a courtroom and testifying against my own son. I thought about dragging this out for months, maybe years, through trials and appeals. I thought about the stress, the media attention, the public spectacle of a mother prosecuting her child. But mostly, I thought about justice, not revenge, justice, making sure Michael faced real consequences and couldn't do this to anyone else. "Accept the plea," I told Sandra, "but I have conditions. I want him to serve actual prison time, not probation. I want his financial planning license permanently revoked. I want him banned from ever having power of attorney over anyone again, and I want a formal admission of guilt on the record in open court." Sandra negotiated hard. The final plea agreement was this. Michael would plead guilty to felony financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and grand theft. He would serve 3 years in prison with no possibility of early release. He would repay every penny of the $187,000, plus $43,000 in interest and legal fees. His professional license would be permanently revoked. He would be barred from ever holding power of attorney, serving as trustee, or managing finances for anyone outside his immediate household. And he would have to allocute in court, meaning he'd have to stand before a judge and verbally admit exactly what he'd done. The plea hearing was held on a cold March morning. The courtroom was half full. Some of Michael's former clients had come to watch, along with a reporter from the Post and Courier and a representative from the State Bar Association. Michael stood before Judge Catherine Morrison in the same courtroom where the preliminary hearing had been held. His expensive lawyer stood beside him, but this time there was no defense to mount, no argument to make, just consequences. Judge Morrison looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Holloway, before I accept your plea, I need to hear from you exactly what you did, in your own words." Michael's voice was barely audible. "I stole money from my mother. I abused my position as her power of attorney to transfer funds from her accounts to accounts I controlled. I took $187,000 over a period of 6 months. When she started questioning the transfers, I lied to her. I tried to convince her she was confused. I threatened to have her declared mentally incompetent if she reported me. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I did it anyway." "Why?" the judge asked. Michael was silent for a long moment. "I was in debt. My business was failing. I saw her money as a solution to my problems. I convinced myself I'd pay it back before she noticed. I was wrong about everything." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Mr. Holloway, you violated the most fundamental trust a person can have, the trust between a parent and a child. You exploited your mother's love for you to commit theft. That betrayal, in my view, is worse than the crime itself. I accept your guilty plea. I sentence you to 3 years in the South Carolina Department of Corrections, full restitution as outlined in the plea agreement, and permanent revocation of your professional license. You will not be eligible for parole." The gavel came down. Just like that, it was over. Michael was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked back at me once, just before the door closed behind him. I couldn't read his expression, whether it was regret, anger, or just resignation. I looked back at him steadily, and then he was gone. The restitution came through in installments over the following 8 months. Michael had to liquidate everything: his car, his condo, his investment accounts. Every penny came back to me with interest until my accounts were whole again. Sandra made sure of it. The State Bar Association formally revoked his license and published their findings. The report was damning, detailing not just what he'd done to me, but the pattern of deception with other clients. 3 former clients filed their own lawsuits based on what the investigation uncovered. I changed all my passwords, closed the accounts Michael had accessed, and opened new ones. I set up a trust with an independent trustee, a professional firm with no family connections. I made sure that if something happened to me, my estate would be managed by people who had no personal stake in my death, coming sooner rather than later. And I moved forward. People ask me if I regret turning in my son. They ask if I miss him, if I've forgiven him, if I plan to have a relationship with him after he gets out of prison. The truth is complicated. Do I miss the son I thought I had? Yes. Do I miss the man who stole from me and threatened me? Not for a second, Faye. Michael is serving his sentence at Perry Correctional Institution. He'll be released in about 2 years. I haven't visited him, and I don't plan to. He's written me 3 letters. I've returned them unopened. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I don't owe him my forgiveness just because he's my son. Forgiveness has to be earned, and he hasn't even begun that work. What he did to me wasn't a mistake. It was a choice he made every single day for 6 months. Every time he transferred money, every time he lied to my face, every time he tried to convince me I was confused, those were choices. The recordings saved me. If I hadn't documented everything, it would have been his word against mine, and I know how that story ends. The confused elderly mother making wild accusations against her devoted son. That's what he was counting on. Instead, I have my money, my home, and my independence. More than that, I have my dignity and the satisfaction of knowing I fought back. I'm 64 now. I've rebuilt my life on my terms. I have wonderful friends, volunteer work I'm passionate about, and a future that belongs to me. I travel. I read. I spend time with people who actually care about me rather than what I'm worth. To anyone watching this who sees warning signs in their own family, who feels that knot in their stomach when someone's handling their money, who's being told not to worry about the details, trust your instincts. Document everything, protect yourself. Love doesn't mean blind trust, especially when money's involved. Hey, my name is Patricia Holloway, and this was my story. Thanks for listening to the end. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. I read every single one.